Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Professor Tejendra Sharma from Department of Commerce, Kurukshetra University, Kurukshetra. Today we are going to talk on the module Taylor's Scientific Management from the paper Principles and Practices of Management. Students, the desired learning outcomes of this module are that you should know the meaning, nature and significance of the principles of management and also understand Taylor's principles and techniques of scientific management. Students, before we study the subject in little more details, let us first of all know a bit historical background of scientific management. The concept of scientific management was introduced by Frederick Taylor in US in the beginning of 20th century. This was a concept which was further carried and developed by Frank and Lillian, Gilbert, Henry Nat, George Berth, Edwin Fallon, etc. But this most significant contribution and the pioneering contribution was by F.W. Taylor, who is also known as the father of scientific management. He was born in 1856 in USA. Let us try to understand the definition and the concept of scientific management. The term scientific management is a combination of two words. One is the scientific and second is the management. In the words of F.W. Taylor, scientific management is a substitution of exact investigations and knowledge from old individual judgments or opinions in the matters relating to the work that is done on a shop floor. According to Peter Drucker, the core of scientific management is basically an organized study of work and the analysis of work into the simplest elements and the systematic improvement of the worker's performance on each of these elements. You would appreciate the fact that both the definitions, one classical and second little more contemporary, look at the objective assessment of the work that is performed by the workers on the shop floor. Students, let us understand the purpose of scientific management. The purpose of scientific management is to increase the production. As you can infer, the standardization and systematization of the methods, the procedures, the tools ultimately contribute to increasing the production of an organization, which is the most important objective of scientific management. The second major objective, which is achieved as a result of adopting scientific methods, is standardization of the methods, which entail development of one of the best ways to perform any job, and it ultimately leads to the standardization of those methods. The third major purpose of scientific management is to reduce the waste and the losses. The systematic and scientific production methods and techniques reduce the waste and loss of the material, and it also helps in the improvement of quality control because the quality standards are adhered to while conducting the inspection, research and the quality control measures. Scientific management also helps in cost reduction, as the cost can be reduced by adopting the cost control techniques. It also helps in appropriate placement, as it aims at the best possible placement, means allocating the right person to the right job. It's not that the scientific management works only for the organization. It also works for the people who work, because it becomes a proper basis for developing the systems for wage incentives, and the higher performers are rewarded. To sum up, the advantages of scientific management include displacement of the customs, the guesswork, and the arbitrary attraction. It defends the workers against soldiering and sloth, which does not make them lazy or shirk work, or be overspeeding, leading to fatigue. It ensures a regular supply of the goods to the customers at the reasonable prices as well. So with this background, let us now understand the features of scientific management. In terms of approach, scientific management is a systematic, analytical, and objective approach to solve the industrial problems. Another important feature of scientific management is the economy. The basis of adopting scientific methods means it leads to economizing the efforts as well as the resources. The third feature of the scientific management is that it has a definite plan. Before starting the work, there must be a well-defined plan so that the work can be done strictly according to the plan and there is no ad hocism which might impede the work at a subsequent stage. The fourth important feature of the scientific management is that it discards the old methods. Old methods which were based on the rule of thumb or which were based on hit or miss approach. There is always a scientific basis if a particular method is being adopted. This is a major advantage. The next feature of scientific management is that it emphasizes not just one component, but it emphasizes on all factors of production, whether it is the men, whether it is the material, or whether it is the technology. In addition to these, the scientific management also emphasizes on the techniques, which means the scientific techniques in the method of work, in the recruitment, selection, and training of the people who are assigned to do this work. The scientific management also attempts to develop each man to its greatest efficiency and prosperity, and it also discovers the best method for doing a work at the most economical cost. Another important feature of scientific management is that there is always a definite aim, which is a main characteristic, implying that while organizing, directing, conducting, and controlling the human activities, we always must specify an aim so that these activities can be organized, directed, conducted, and controlled for achieving this aim. The resultant feature of scientific management is that it changes the attitude of both the top level, middle level, as well as the lower level managers and the workers, because they know that whatever they are doing, that is measured objectively and systematically. And the last feature of scientific management is that it offers a set of rules which are same for everyone in accordance with the laid down plan so that the objectives can be achieved. According to Taylor, it is no single element but a whole combination of these features which constitutes the scientific management. Let us study some of the positive impacts of the principle of scientific management. The first and the most apparent positive impact of the scientific management is that it leads to standardization of results. Before this, it was based on the individual's opinions, perspectives, and perceptions. But when scientific management techniques were put into practice, it was based on an objective and measurable parameter to measure the output or the work performed by the human beings. The second positive impact of scientific principle was that it guaranteed a specific result or an outcome. human behavior is primarily very different into different situations. So a top manager may not be in a position to actually assess how much will be the output from a given input. But when scientific management techniques were put into practice, there is a possibility of at least estimating what would be the specific outcome in a particular set of resources. Then the objectives of the organization which were laid down, they could be achieved in a more efficient way, in a more better way. And there was a better utilization of the resources, skills, and the budget. Taylor had found, on the basis of his observations and studies, that even a small production activity like say loading of pigs of iron into the boxes, this can be planned scientifically and managed. This can result in tremendous saving of the human energy as well as wastage of the time and the material. Hence, the scientific management paved a way for improving the efficiency of the organizations. The scientific management also helps in achieving a harmony within the organization and not the discords. Every organization comprises of two groups. One is the workers and second is the managers. And there can be possibilities when both of them can feel dissatisfied from each other. Workers may feel that they are overburdened and underpaid, while the management may feel that the workers are good for nothing and they are paid unnecessarily. By adopting the scientific principles, Taylor emphasized that the interests of the employers as well as employees, they are not mutually exclusive. They are not the ones which are bound to clash with each other. As a matter of fact, the scientific principles seek to harmonize the objectives of the employees as well as the employers, the managers as well as the workers, who are the same two sides of the same coin. This group harmony suggests that there should be mutual give and take situations and there should be proper understanding so that the group as a whole contributes to the maximum output. Let us further study some of the positive impacts of the principles of scientific management. In the background of our earlier discussion, we can infer that by adopting the scientific management, there is a change of attitude of both the groups towards each other, the attitude of the workers as well as the managers. It leads to a cordial relationship which can be developed between the two. Also, the goals of the organization can be easily achieved because you have a sound basis while formulating the goals as well as adopted scientific principles to achieve the goals. Each activity that an organization does can be done in a better way, and there is the development of team spirit. Adopting scientific management also leads to higher morale of the employees and helps in the cooperation and coordination in the organization. Let's take the example of Japanese work culture, which is a classical example of such a principle. In the Japanese companies, the paternalistic style of management is adopted, where there is complete openness between the management and the workers. There is a sense of cooperation and not individualism. Cooperation means that the action of various groups of people is joint, or it's basically a teamwork which is working towards achieving the same results. This principle states that work should be done with mutual cooperation and confidence, and the employees and management should cooperate with each other. Competition should be replaced by cooperation. It leads to development of the team spirit, higher morale of the employees, cooperation and coordination within the organization, and the goals which can be achieved. Development of each and every person to his or her greatest efficiency and prosperity is another important outcome of the principle of scientific management. As a result of adopting scientific management, the right person to the right job is assigned, which provides for the selection of the persons to be made as per the job requirements. It seeks to assess the physical, psychological, and the educational requirements of the job and match them with the capabilities of the candidates. Some other positive impacts of this principle are that as a result of scientific management, we have scientifically trained workers, there is greater work satisfaction, and also there is a greater understanding of the nature of job which the workers are expected to perform. The workers produce more and end up earning more. The whole focus of scientific management is on maximizing the output and not restricting the output. Maximizing the output means increasing profits and reducing the costs. Scientific management involves continuous increase in production and productivity instead of restricted production, either by the management or by the workers. Taylor hated efficiency and deliberate curtailment of the production output. Students, Taylor had proposed the four main techniques of scientific management. The first technique is the functional foremanship. The second technique is standardization and simplification of the work. The third is the work study. And fourth technique of scientific management is the differential piece wage system. Let us study these techniques in little more detail. The functional foremanship. In a factory system, the foreman represents the managerial figure with whom the workers are in face-to-face contact on daily basis. So, Taylor suggested that by separation of planning from doing resulted into the development of a supervision system which could take planned work adequately besides keeping the supervision on a worker. For this purpose, Taylor evolved the concept of functional foremanship based on specialization of the functions. Functional foremanship is an extension of the principle of division of work and specialization on the shop floor. Each worker will have to take the orders from 8 foremen in the related process or the functions of production. Taylor had suggested the division of work of a factory manager into two sub-departments. One is the planning department and second is the production department. 4 experts are appointed in each of the departments, and the experts in planning department do the planning part and experts in the production department help in the production output. This concept of functional foremanship can be explained with the help of this diagram. Suppose an organization has a factory manager who is responsible for running the factory. The factory manager will be assisted by 2 heads. One will be in charge of the planning and another will be in charge of the production. These two are separated as they are specialized functions in themselves. The planning in charge is assisted by 4 more professionals. One is the instruction card clerk, second is the route clerk, the third is the time and cost clerk, and fourth is the disciplinarian clerk. As you can see, the instruction card clerk will be responsible for issuing the set of instructions to the group of people who will be assigned the tasks. The route clerk will look at ways to minimize the route of the workers to achieve the output. The time and cost clerk will keep a check on the time consumed to perform a particular task and the cost involved in performing that task. And the disciplinarian manager or the disciplinarian clerk is entrusted upon with the responsibility of maintaining the discipline within this entire function. The production in charge is assisted by 4 people who work under him. One would be the gang boss. The gang boss who will lead a group of workers to actually do the production activity. The repair boss would be assigned the responsibility of timely repair of the machinery so that the gang boss can get the work done from his gang without any loss of production because of the want of repairs. The inspector will keep a track on the activities of these different teams, and the speed boss will speed up the whole operations, and each of these will actually oversee the workers so as to achieve the maximum output from him. The second set of principles of scientific management is standardization and simplification of work. Standardization refers to the process of setting standards for every business activity. It can be the standardization of the processes, the raw material, the time, the product, the machinery, the methods of working conditions. These standard elements, they become the benchmarks which must be adhered to during the production. The objectives of standardization are to reduce a given line or product into fixed types, sizes, and characteristics. Standardization also helps to establish interchangeability of manufactured parts and the products. It establishes standards of excellence and quality in the material, and also establishes the standard of performance of the men and the material. Simplification aims at eliminating the superfluous varieties, the sizes, and the dimensions, while standardization implies devising newer varieties instead of the existing ones. This results in the savings of labor, machines, and the tools. It also implies reduced inventories and results in fuller utilization of the equipment. It also helps in achieving the increased turnover. For example, large companies like Nokia, Toyota, Microsoft have successfully implemented standardization and simplification procedures. The most talked about technique of scientific management is the work study. Work study is also known as a scientific study, which means an objective and systematic observation of each step of operations of a work. The work study tries to minutely observe each process of production or any activity that happens in an organization and a part thereof to decide if the work is performed in a systematic and a scientific manner. The work study further comprised of 4 sub-studies. One is known as the motion study. The second is the time study. Third is the fatigue study. And fourth is the method study. Each of these studies aimed at streamlining and quantifying various parameters to convert the inputs into the outputs. For example, the method study. The method study aims at minimizing the cost of production by using better and optimal mix of resources. It seeks to decide the best method of doing a job. It helps in reducing the transportation, storage, and handling cost of the raw materials and the goods. Method study is an analysis of doing the work The mnemonic SREDIM, that is SREDIM, it's a common sense heuristic or a general paradigm solving strategy, represents the subcomponents of a method study. The first subcomponent of method study is to select the tasks for the study. We must really know what are the tasks which we want to study. After selecting the tasks, we need to record the facts about them, examine them, develop a new method if it leads to more efficiency, install and implement that method, and maintain that method. The second study coming under this domain is the motion study. Motion study refers to studying of the movement like lifting, putting objects, sitting and changing positions, which are undertaken while doing a particular job. Unnecessary movements are sought to be eliminated so that it takes less time to complete the job in a greater efficiency. The third study coming under this domain is the time study, which determines the standard time taken to perform a well-defined job. The time measuring devices are used for each element of the task. The standard time is fixed for whole of the task by taking several readings. The method of time study depends upon the volume and frequency of the task, the cycle time of operation, and time measurement costs. The objective of time study is to determine the number of workers to be employed, frames suitable incentive schemes, and also determines the labor cost. Now, workers also get tired. Just as we study the output, there is a need to study the fatigue as well. Fatigue study is basically study of fatigue which is caused by long working hours, and it emphasizes on the frequency of rest intervals, the duration of rest intervals, and the number of rest intervals. So this study basically aims at providing proper rest interval to the employees to increase the effectiveness of work. Fatigue study seeks to determine the frequency of rest intervals in a completed task. For example, normally in a plant, a work takes place in 3 shifts of 8 hours each. Even in a single shift, a worker has to be given some rest intervals so as to take his or her lunch. If the work involves heavy manual labor, and then small pauses have to be frequently given to the worker so that he can recharge his efficiency for optimal contribution. The next technique of scientific management is the differential piece wage system. Taylor stated this method as a part of the scientific management. The underlying principle of the system is to reward an efficient worker and to penalize an inefficient person. In Taylor's system, inefficient persons have no place in the organization. The main features of this scheme are that the minimum wages are not guaranteed in this plan. A standard time is fixed for taking the completion of the task. Different rates are fixed for taking standard time or more, and higher rate is given if work is completed in a standard or less time, and lower rate is offered if more than the standard time is taken by a worker. For example, it is determined that standard output per worker per day is 10 units, then those who made standard or more than the standard will get, say, rupees 50 per unit, and those below it will get rupees 40 per unit. Now the efficient worker making 11 units will get 11 into 50, that is rupees 550 per day, whereas a worker who makes 9 units will get 9 into 40, that is rupees 360 per day. This way they are differentiating between the performers and the non-performers. Students, we have discussed the advantages and various techniques and characteristics of scientific management. However, all that glitters is not gold. Just as it has been praised, there is some criticism of the scientific management as well. The criticism can be for different set of people as they have perceived it. Firstly, there is a grievance of the workers. The biggest grievance of scientific management is that it ignores the human aspect. The workers strongly oppose the scientific management as it ignores the human feelings and the interpersonal relations and treats the workers as cogs of a machine. The second thing that workers feel is that it leads to the monotony of the work. Since scientific management entails standardization of the works, the methods, and the techniques, there is little scope for individual initiative, which leads to the monotony in the types of the works that the managers are performing. The third grievance of the workers is that it leads to the exploitation as they feel so, because they feel that by treating the workers as machines, there is a possibility of exploitation of the workers. And scientific management also discourages the trade unions, as the scientific methods do not lead to any issues where there can be confrontation. The grievance of the employees is that it leads to costs. The application of scientific methods involves cost to the organization. All organizations may not be prepared for this extra cost, and also there is less scope for flexibility. There can be issues where scientific management would not allow any room for the creativity. Only thing is they look for the predefined measures of achieving the output. The third grievance is for the public. That means it disregards the human beings who are just economic instruments of the production process, thereby ignoring the human aspect. Then, while treating, planning, and implementing the distinct functions of scientific management, there is an ignorance of the interrelationship and interdependence of the two vital managerial functions. And third major grievance which the people hold is that there is no one best way, because the concept is built upon finding a best way, and this best way cannot be universally applicable. Now this is something which needs to be built upon while building the scientific processes. So students, let us summarize what we have learned in this lecture. We have learned the principles of scientific management which were given by Taylor. These principles became widely practiced into the production systems of the factories, and it resulted in a cooperation between the workers and the managers. It actually helped in evolving the teamworks in the organizations, and today what we see in the form of large group of people working together owe their foundations to the principles which were developed almost a century ago. While Taylorism in a pure sense isn't practiced the way it was in this original form, because we have moved and there have been a lot of technological inputs and further innovations in these principles, but still they provided a basic guideline for the scientific approach towards management. Taylorism contributed towards advancement of the management theory as well as practice. It has introduced the systematic selection and training procedures, and every aspect of the organization is analyzed in the terms of what output can be achieved from the inputs. The four techniques given by Taylor, we have studied them, and we have also tried to understand how the positive points as well as negative points of the scientific studies, scientific approach to management. We have also studied the advantages as well as disadvantages of the scientific management. While the advantages include the measurable outputs, better understanding between the managers and the workers, objective assessment of the output, and a proper reward system for the work done, the issues where people disagreed with scientific management entailed the human aspect, because everything cannot be measured, and scientific approach to management considered management as cogs of machine. But just as everything has got its advantages and disadvantages, the thought of scientific management paved the way for further development of the theory and practice in the discipline of management.